Habs top prospect Lane Hutson was hugely disrespected. A new top 50 NHL prospects ranking list came out, and Lane Hutson, along with some other Habs prospects, are way lower than they should be. We'll be talking about that, plus Jordan Harris joining some elite company with his recent performance, and plus we'll reflect on the Habs weekend wins on Super Bowl weekend, so you won't want to miss anything we have to say on this edition of Habs Digest. Hello, bonjour, ahoy, and welcome to today's news editions of Habs Digest. I'm your host, Josh Gosse, alongside my co-host, Jesse Poirier. And quick reminder, guys, we are, like 50 subs away from 4,000? If you guys haven't hit that button yet, do it right now. We are so close we can taste it, and we know you guys can help us out with it. Jesse, first topic today, we got to get right into this. Lane Hutson was disrespected. A top 50 prospect list came out on The Athletic, and surprise, surprise, as the small defenseman gets disrespected again. Take a look at this. Here are the Habs prospects on this list. Lane Hutson, the headliner here, ranked 17th, Jesse. 17th in the top 50 NHL prospects. Oh man, we're going to be getting in that in a second, but not only that, Sean Farrell is probably lower than he should be, Owen Beck, and the fact that Joshua Juan Meshar aren't even ranked, I mean, I was pretty upset when I saw this list. What about you?
I was too, definitely. You know, it's like Montreal Canadiens, it seems like we kind of get the short end of the stick for whatever reason. You have to feel like if this was like a Leafs prospect, you know, TSN would be all over him, calling him the second coming of Bobby Orr, and you know he'd be higher on this list. I just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, none at all. And so Logan Cooley was ranked number 1, which it makes sense. He was a really high draft pick by the Arizona Coyotes. They really expected him to do well. But we have some stats that we want to show you guys to maybe give Lane Hutson a bit more of a case. What I'm about to show you is the top point per game players, the highest point per game averages in the entire NCAA, not filtered by anything. You can see Adam Fantilli, one of the top prospects for this draft, is number 1 at 1.88 points per game. But then Sean Farrell at 2, 1.71. Reminder, he was ranked 41st. And Lane Hutson. Lane Hutson, the defenseman, is 4th in total points per game in the NCAA. He's at a higher points per game average than Logan Cooley, the guy ranked at number 1, and he is a defenseman. Yes, Jesse, obviously there are some questions about his defensive ability and how that's going to translate to the next level, but recent Boston University physicals have shown that he is now definitely 5'10". He is growing still, and even with maybe some defensive shortcomings, with the stats like that, those offensive stats that seem to be like once in a generation almost, like really, really good players have been putting up these stats that Lane Hutson's put up. How can you possibly rank him at 17?
Absolutely. And it's like, it seems like some insiders are kind of turning around the corner, but it seems like some scouts are just kind of still eating the dust on this. You know, we had some Craig Button come out and recently said, like, if he was just a little bit taller, like this guy would have been drafted first in the last draft. How do you take that and plus everything amazing that he's done this year and then still end up at 14th? It's like, and you're right, Josh, it's like, we can't blame that all on the height anymore, you know? And to be honest, he's not the biggest guy, but you know, you're starting to look at the NHL nowadays, like, especially with forwards, like, you know, he's not too far off though, right? Like for sure, we still got some big guys, but it's just some people are still caught in that the NHL and looking at it in some ways. And I'm so happy that the Montreal Canadiens aren't. You know, I think having that analytics department, all these things really helped in making a decision like this, because there's going to be the new school of hockey, which is going to be eager to take on players like this, recognizing their value. And I think the old school kind of mentality that, you know, everybody, you know, needs to be 6'2", 200 pounds to play defense. I think that those are the teams, you know, if they have that sort of thinking, that, you know, it's going to hurt them in the future.
Yeah, I mean, sure, it's nice to have defensemen that size on a championship roster, no doubt. But like you said, Jesse, the NHL is transitioning to, it's really a skilled player's game now. We're seeing a lot more small players with high skill levels making it to the NHL level than we did before, and I think Lane Hutson fits that perfectly. But again, we focused on Lane Hutson, but I wanted to talk a bit about a couple other guys. Sean Farrell, number 1, a guy making a push for the Hobey Baker. Sure, he's not a freshman, he's a year older, but he's still putting up insane stats for Harvard, second in the entire NCAA in points per game, 41st. I don't think he should be jumping up into the top 25 or anything, but maybe a few spots higher. Same thing with Hutson. I mean, I don't think he's necessarily a bona fide top 10 guy, but I think knocking on the door of top 10 or even just inside the top 10 would have been better. And finally, Jesse, Joshua Roy, a guy that scored 50 goals in the Q last year. Yeah, again, there's a lot of questions. Oh, he hasn't progressed in the Q this year. but look at what his production was like in the World Juniors when he was placed with other great players. He was no doubt one of Team Canada's best players in that tournament, and for him not to be ranked in the top 50, do you think that's a bit of disrespect to him as well?
It does. It is definitely disrespect. And I think that he's going to use it as motivation in the future, because that line at the World Jays, they put up the most by any line ever in that tournament.
Yep.
And for sure, Connor Bedard's is like putting up ridiculous numbers, but like Joshua Watt isn't getting enough respect for his effort, his contribution to that team. Like, I would say that nobody else on that team would have played at that position on that line better than him. He was the type of player that was needed for that, a great combination of skill and then also hard work, right? Which, as we know, isn't always easy to come around with having those both at very high levels. So I think he's been absolutely disrespected. I'm just kind of blown away not to see him here in the top 50.
Yeah, well, that's it. There are other teams who I'm sure are fighting for their prospects to be higher. Every team, every fan likes to think their prospects are the best, but we have some decent evidence to back it up. All the same, though, that'll do it for our rant. Let us know what you guys think of these rankings in the comments to see if they're too low or even too high. We want to hear from you. Topic number 2. Jesse, Jordan Harris joined some elite company. So if you guys have been paying attention, we've been talking a lot about Jordan Harris recently, mainly because he signed that 2-year, $2.8 million, $1.4 per year contract extension with Montreal. And since he signed that, he's looked like a new player. He was already one of our most solid guys, but he's been getting some goal totals. He had 2 goals in a game this weekend. And take a look at this stat. Jordan Harris became the 4th rookie defenseman in the past 35 years to score multiple goals in the game for Montreal. Who were the others? PK Subban, Andrei Markov, and Matthias Schneider. Jesse, when you're talking about Montreal defenseman legends, I mean, maybe Matthias Schneider's a bit lower, but especially people of our generation know Subban and Markov a bit more. But what elite company is that for Jordan Harris to jump into? A guy who has been so solid so far, and we have very high expectations for.
Absolutely. And, he's getting these numbers not while sacrificing his defensive play as well. And I think that's one of the best things about Harris is like, he's just very consistent, right? And that's what I like about him. He doesn't get too hot. He doesn't get too cold. He doesn't seem like to me like a streaky player, so just to be that consistent. But then, we talked earlier, Josh, just, coming off that 10-day break, what Jordan Harris's goals were into coming into this essentially second half. We know much less than that now, part of the season though, but essentially after that break, and he was mentioning that he wanted to step up his offensive side of the game, that he wanted to start shooting more. And, we're having the signs of a player that's really kind of thought about that and has come back from the break ready to play. I love the way that he's jumping into the break and he's making really smart decisions. Once again, he's not sacrificing himself, defensively. He's realizing that in order to have a proper cycle game and to really attack properly on the rush, that sometimes you need to come up. And as a rookie defenseman, that's not an easy thing to do, to be making these decisions. But it seems like we have a very smart and skilled hockey player in Jordan Harris.
Absolutely, and he's already proving his worth in that contract. And like we've been saying, if he can continue to play at that level throughout the duration of this contract, it'll be a huge steal. Maybe he's not going to end up playing 20-plus minutes every single night, but when you got a reliable defenseman that every single night can come in, and he's a guy that's really limited his rookie mistakes, especially since the start of the season, it's always good to have guys like that. And at a $1.4 million price tag with his recent developments, I think it's a bargain. Final topic, Jesse. Just want to do a quick reflection on the Habs' weekend wins. Of course, the Habs go into the Super Bowl weekend with a back-to-back in La Centre Belle against the New York Islanders on Saturday and the Edmonton Oilers on Sunday, and boy, did they impress. They beat the Islanders in overtime on a beautiful Mike Matheson goal off a rebound, and then on Sunday, yesterday's game was insanity, a massive 6-2 win. Jesse, this brings me back to that Jeff Gorton quote we heard when he was on a podcast a couple months ago, and he said that Montreal, they're rebuilding, but they're rebuilding around winning. And I feel like it was no better exemplified than the performances we saw from the Habs this weekend.
That's so true. And what we're seeing is a team that's really starting to find its identity. And I think they've been really reinvigorated by a lot of the newcomers that we've had come on this team. We saw HP, having a big weekend. Harvey Pinard, one of our newcomers to the team. Alex Belzil scoring his first goal in the NHL. I think just the fact that they're not taking any shifts for granted, that they're really coming here trying to carve out a space for them is really of huge benefit to this team. And it's also helping to shape our identity because, Josh, what were they doing this weekend? You know, they were driving so much play to the front of the net. They were being scrappy. And this is the way that you have to play to win. And in my opinion, have long-term success, and especially in the playoffs as well. And I was also hearing from Martin St. Louis, and he was kind of talking about some of the success of individual players and as well as the team over this past weekend. And he says that it's like, you know, you don't just show somebody a game plan and then they just execute it right the next day. Like, it's really a process. You can't just expect to pass your agenda onto the team and then just one day, oh yeah, we're playing perfectly the style that they want us to play. It's been a process. And he kind of revealed his groundwork and his philosophy behind that. It was to start off with the defensive play first. And for me, that sounds very, very sound, pardon the pun, you know, just to start off your goaltending, your defense, right? Just to get that foundation just correct. And then from there, the offense then comes in as a part of that, you know, and getting back to Jordan Harris, what a great example of that, a defenseman, no less. You know, we've seen so many plays where, you know, even our overtime winner where, you know, it's created off of a defensive play and then transitioning, bringing that puck in, having a defenseman come into the play, albeit in overtime 3-on-3. You better jump in the rush there. But at the same time, still a defenseman, you know, creating that offense, which in a nutshell is Martin St. Louis' philosophy. And I think that we're starting to see it come into place. And that's why we're starting to get some really great offensive results as a part of that.
Yeah, I think so too. And defense leading to offense is something that we haven't seen a lot from Montreal this year, but this weekend we saw it a little bit more. The amount of blocked shots, the amount of sticks in the passing lane. They were sort of sheltering Montembeault and Allen in each game respectively from allowing too many shots against the Oilers. When Alex Belzile scored his first NHL goal, the shots were 8-0 almost 10 minutes into the first period. Montreal has really ticked up on defense. Like you said, Coach St. Louis' plan is coming to fruition. Especially, well, I mean, it's really impressive with all this roster turnover they've had, with all the injuries, with all the AHL call-ups. But guys are filling in their roles. There seems to be this level of camaraderie and chemistry within the team that is allowing each player to play to their individual strengths, not only because of the team, but because of the coaching as well, allowing these guys to play their game. And we're seeing it pay off with guys like Kirby, Dach, Raphael Harvey-Pinard, even our young defenseman, someone like Jordan Harris, Justin Barron. So I think you put it perfectly, Jesse. The performances this weekend were amazing, and hopefully they're great indicators of things to come. That'll do it for this news edition of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Help us get to 4,000. We are that close. You guys can help us out with it, and we really, really appreciate all the support. I'm Josh Gosse for my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.